Hello to everyone and welcome to a new Energy Capital interview. I'm Ana Tafoya and today I'm very pleased to talk with Claudia Espinosa, editor for Energy Mexico with Independent Commodity Intelligence Services, ICIS. Claudia, it's very nice to see you today. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you very much, Claudia. So, doing this interview with me is Aldo Santillan, Managing Director and Editor-in-Chief of the Energy Capital magazine. Hi, Aldo. Great to see you today as well. How are you doing?
Hello, Anna. I'm good. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be today having with us here Claudia to talk about some important topics for the energy sector.
Thank you very much, Aldo. So in this interview, Claudia will talk with us about her outlook on natural gas transactions for 2021, her take on the impact that last February's Texas freeze had on the natural gas market in Mexico, and the challenges and opportunities that different Mexican regions have in this regard. So I'll start with our first question. Claudia, what is your outlook for 2021 on natural gas transactions and volumes, considering first, the recent revisions to GDP forecasts, second, the peak summer demand season just around the corner, and third, an increase in the COVID-19 vaccines distribution?
Well, barring unforeseen circumstances, which we have become accustomed to now with coronavirus and vaccine distributions, that if any unforeseen circumstances that would require a lockdown, ICIS anticipates a consistent ramp up in the coming weeks of the volumes of natural gas marketed in Mexico. This is partly because Mexico's finance ministry, Mexican economists, and the International Monetary Fund have increased their expectations for the country's economic growth this year to between 4.5% and 5.3%. And of course, economic growth is correlated with energy consumption. And for natural gas in Mexico, the ramp up typically begins in late spring, when temperatures begin to rise. For folks joining us who may not be aware, in Mexico, demand for natural gas for power generation there's a correlation between for cooling demand, meaning in the US typically there is a greater demand for power generation for heating, whereas in Mexico it's the opposite, and there's more demand for power generation and natural gas when it is hotter. And our expectation is that the volumes of natural gas would continue increasing through the spring and peak in August in the summer. Then they would begin their usual decrease in September when there is less power generation demand for cooling. Now in Mexico, July, August, and September are usually when gas consumption increases most, and with more vaccinations being distributed in Mexico, the economy and energy consumption are currently expected to grow through the rest of 2021. If we look at data published by Mexico's energy regulator, CRE, it shows that marketed natural gas volumes since 2018 have typically fluctuated up or down by less than 10% when we compare the first and the second quarters, when there is fairly limited demand in Mexico. However, when we compare the first and third quarters of each year, we see a consistent increase in the consumption, a consistent increase in the volumes of gas marketed in the country. This increase from the first to the third quarters has consistently been between 20% and 36%. Now, we do not yet have full first quarter data from CRE, but if we do an estimate, assuming the same volumes are marketed in March as in January, because February was atypical, that would bring first quarter volumes to around 500 million gigajoules or 474 BCF per day. If we take this a step further, a third quarter estimate assuming a 30% increase from this hypothetical first quarter volume would mean flows could reach a combined total of 0.7 billion gigajoules for the peak months of July, August, and September. And you asked about transactions as well. The number of transactions associated with these volumes have been around 300 for the whole country per month in the past couple of years. And ICIS expects there to be a similar number of monthly transactions under current market conditions.
Claudia, in this sense, what were some of the issues caused by last February's Texas freeze on natural gas transactions and demand in Mexico's market?
That is a great question. The data from CRE, Mexico's energy regulator, shows us there was a dramatic decrease in the number of transactions and volumes of natural gas marketed in Mexico. Pipeline imports decreased in part because supply was not able to be transported to Mexico because natural gas production in Texas is not prepared for extreme winter weather conditions. The February freeze was very atypical for Texas weather, and supply conditions improved within 2 weeks after the freeze passed. Demand for pipeline natural gas in Mexico shifted partially and temporarily to liquefied natural gas, or LNG. Mexico was forced to balance its natural gas system, or known as the Sistran gas, by purchasing LNG that is brought in on ships and then regasified and injected into the gas system. There was a portion of demand for natural gas to supply combined cycle plants that simply went unmet for several days during the freeze while the LNG was purchased and shipped to Mexico.
So, Claudia, do you consider that these issues are likely to be solved this year? And how is the key state of Texas recovering from this?
The supply and production issues in Texas appear to have largely resolved within 2 weeks of the end of the freeze, but the event did raise important questions that are being discussed by stakeholders and policymakers in Texas as well as in Mexico. The event highlighted the vulnerabilities in the interdependence between Mexico and Texas in the natural gas space. Mexico is particularly vulnerable because, unlike Texas and the south central region of the US, it has extremely limited gas storage. Mexican energy policy does have regulations and a mandate to prepare several days of natural gas storage, but it has not yet been developed. My understanding is the government authorities have been seeking to remedy the lack of storage. It does take a long time to build that type of infrastructure, but the good news is that the regulations and the mandate are in place in Mexico.
Claudia, I just want to go back a little bit on that point, and I would like you to point out the most important consequences that the Texas freeze had on the prices for the northeast region of Mexico and Monterrey's market.
That's a great question. So Mexico's northeast region includes this industrial Monterrey market that is so important for Mexico. The chief consequence in February for the region and for Monterrey was record prices. According to the CRE data I've been mentioning, there was a very dramatic increase. So Monterrey, in the northeast region in January, saw prices of average prices of $3.18 per MMBTU. And that price jumped to nearly $20 per MMBTU during February. So you can imagine if, for example, you are accustomed to paying $3 per gallon for gasoline, and suddenly you are paying $20 per gallon of gasoline. It's quite a shock. ICIS price indications show March prices for Monterrey were closer to normal market levels, around $3 per MMBTU. So that tells us the effect was temporary. Aside from natural gas prices, the record high natural gas prices for many in the Northeast region, the lack of gas supply caused many energy-intensive industrials to suspend operations for several days. A survey completed by Mexico's Business Coordinating Council, taken a few days after the freeze began, found that nearly 60% of its 482 member businesses that were surveyed had to completely stop production because they lacked natural gas or power. And Nuevo León was among the top states represented in this survey. So we can infer there were wider economic consequences experienced in Monterrey because of lost productivity.
In your opinion, Claudia, what are the main affectations that Mexico's central region is having on its natural gas market due to the coronavirus pandemic?
That is a fantastic question. The central region is so important for Mexico for many reasons, but for the natural gas space, it includes the capital, Mexico City, as well as several small surrounding states. And this is really the area of Mexico that has been hit quite hard. The local economy was hit quite hard, in part due to population density. But the arrival of coronavirus to this part of Mexico hit the local economy and energy consumption quite hard. This region is responsible for an important percentage of Mexico's economy and its GDP, which of course is correlated with greater energy consumption. When we analyze the data published by CRE, we observe the central region records the greatest number of transactions on a monthly basis out of the 6 regions. So the number of transactions this region normally sees is between 100 and 150. And we can compare that to the Northeast region we were just talking about, which usually records between 50 and 70 transactions per month. The interesting thing is the volumes associated with the transactions in the central, with these transactions are slightly greater in the Northeast. This is because of the energy-intensive industries located there, but the central region is not far behind. When we analyze the data from 2020, we see a clear and sustained decrease in the volumes of natural gas marketed from April to July for the central region. This, of course, was the time period when Mexico was locked down and was coming out of lockdown. And the natural gas volumes that are recorded did not return closer to normal levels in the central region until August, because Mexico City and the surrounding areas were simply consuming less energy during the lockdown and afterward when economic activity was beginning to recover.
Finally, from our side, this is the last question. What is your outlook for Mexico's Central West region, considering Guadalajara's pipe system potential?
ICIS expects to see continued growth in the Central West region in coming years. It has among the highest potential for more gas marketing because the Guadalajara pipeline systems has remaining idle capacity, and it also has connectivity to the industrial city of Guadalajara as well as nearby power plants. The Guadalajara system, for folks who may be less familiar with it, is a pipeline system built to transport natural gas from the Texas hub of Waha to the industrial city of Guadalajara in Mexico. And it really has been key in bringing the least expensive natural gas in the world from Waha to Guadalajara and down closer to the Manzanillo area more recently. Recent pipeline modernizations near Manzanillo have made it possible to deliver more Waha gas to the area, which means that gas is replacing some LNG imports that are more expensive that are usually brought in periodically via ships. The interesting thing is that not all segments of the Guadalajara system are being used at or even near full capacity, which means there is room for more natural gas to flow through the system. I expect more Central West demand to continue to materialize in coming years as Mexico's economy recovers from coronavirus. And to set some expectations for the pace of that growth, we can look to estimates that were issued in mid-April by the IMF. And they said they expect Mexico's economy to grow 5% this year, 3% in 2022, and then reach pre-pandemic levels in 2023. So we will continue to monitor how this plays out for the Central West region. But overall, I can say that I expect growth and I'm very excited to see what happens in the Central West region.
Well, Claudia, thank you very much for sharing these insights and for sharing your answers with us. Could you like to share some final thoughts in this regard?
I think the natural gas market in Mexico is absolutely fascinating, and I would really encourage readers to watch that space. There's so much potential for growth, and it does not make the headlines quite as often as the other energy markets, but there's some really great things, and Mexico is poised to be able to take advantage of its proximity to Texas, and I'm just very excited to see what happens.